Opposition parties want President Cyril Ramaphosa to account. He'll face questions in Parliament about the theft on his Phala Phala farm in Limpopo. Parties will also not shy away from asking him about the power crisis, crime and unemployment in the country. Well, we have the President's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, with us here in studio. Mr. Magwenya, thank you very much for your time here on All Angles. You heard what the people of Alexandra are saying specifically about the announcement yesterday that there's this advisory panel on fighting corruption. They're saying that he has a case that is looming on him anyway at the moment. So what if he uses this exact panel to cover up? What's your response?
No, first of all, the Advisory Council is an advisory body that is appointed at the President's prerogative, and its function is to advise the President and government on the implementation of the anti-corruption strategy. So it's not an investigating authority. Investigating authorities are busy with a number of investigations across the board, in particular in relation to corruption, which the President enumerated quite well in terms of both the commitments that he made as well as the outcomes of the work that has been done by law enforcement agencies in dealing specifically with corruption, which also includes prosecuting cases coming out of the state capture inquiry. Already that process is already underway, while the President's team is leading an implementation task team that will formulate the implementation plan for government with respect to the Zondo recommendations, and the President has committed to table those by the end of October to Parliament.
But did you get the sense from those South Africans that my colleague Mobile has been speaking to that they're feeling quite despondent towards not only government but the President himself? Is that the feeling you get?
Look, the feeling I get is there's also an element of confusion because of what I will call the noise in the system, the kind of misinformation that is out there. And I think it's important that we separate issues. With respect to the issue of Phala Phala, that issue is being investigated, and the President is supportive and cooperating with that investigation. With the issue with respect to economic and socio-economic issues that impact communities on the ground, those issues are being addressed. Part of what the President is going to address in Parliament today is work being done around energy, work being done around resolving the GBV crisis that we're faced with in the country. It's work that's being done around managing issues around illegal migration, for example. And so there are efforts underway to address all of those concerns by communities and to ensure that no one is left behind as the country picks up the pieces from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as pushing ahead with the economic recovery plan.
Speaking about the Phala Phala issue, I mean, we all know that opposition parties are going to try and push this one quite a bit this afternoon in Parliament. Does the President not possibly feel that maybe he could have handled it differently to how he's been handling it?
Interestingly, in the questions that have been submitted, only one party submitted one question. One question that was submitted on the Phala Phala matter. Other parties raised issues that are of importance with respect to the energy issue, the stabilizing of the grid, the GBV issue, for example. Some of the questions relate to the outcomes of the Presidential Social Sector Summit with respect to efforts around poverty alleviation, as well as dealing with some of the social ills that we see in society. So Phala Phala is not as dominant with everybody as we would like to make it to be. As I said, there's only one question that has risen from there. Suffice to say, I think it's important that we reiterate the message that we've been putting out to say the President remains committed to cooperate with the investigation. That investigation is going ahead. I think the Hawks, I stand to be corrected, last week or so, announced that they've interviewed a number of people. So that process is underway without fear or favor, and no one is interfering with it. The President has responded comprehensively to the public protector.
Yeah.
That process is underway. So from an accountability point of view, the president has not escaped accountability, and for all intents and purposes, he cannot escape any form of accountability with respect to the constitutional requirements as well as the laws of the country.
And the executive's code that he signed on as well in Parliament, but also,
absolutely,
you know, that Section 89 process is going to go ahead. The
Yes.
National Speaker giving it the green light. On
Yes.
Thursday, political parties will have to have a list of all the people that they have chosen to represent them in that particular process. How's the President feeling around the fact that that's also now happening, an impeachment process against him?
He's supportive. He's supportive of all forms of due process that will finally put this matter to rest in a credible way. And that's what the president is seeking. So it's a parliamentary process that he respects. It's a parliamentary process that will proceed within the prescripts of the Constitution. And the president will do what he has done already. He will fully cooperate with that process and submit himself to any requirement of accountability that's required of him.
Speaking about the different panels, I mean, I wrote down the list. And I just want to, like, you know, just tell you about this list. These panels are particularly, you know, whether advisory panels or commissions that are expected to help him fight the power crisis in Eskom. So this is one of the big questions that he's going to have to answer this afternoon. So there is a presidential climate finance task team headed by Daniel Minele. That also has, of course, to do a bit with our crisis as well. Even though it's about climate change, it also has to do with the energy.
Just transition program.
Yes, and the Just Transition program. Then in 2018, he appointed the high-level task team to come up with solutions to Eskom. This was also headed by the former CEO, Brian Dames. 2019 panel of experts, some of them international, also looking at the same issue. You know, there was also an interministerial committee looking at the Eskom issue back in 2019, where the deputy president was heading it, you know, because it was interministerial. And now, just last month or a few weeks ago, the president speaking about the national power crisis that we have, and he appointed the National Energy Crisis Committee that is going to be chaired by the DG in the presidency. Why so many panels of advisors and experts, etc., to deal with one issue ever since 2018? So
on the surface, it's one issue. When you start dealing with it, it's multiple issues that are quite complex in nature, as you will know. With respect to the energy crisis more broadly, the president is seeking to add more megawatts into the grid. And that is not just sorting out issues around Eskom. It's also more broadly in terms of how do we do that quickly and as efficiently as possible. And there are a number of interdependencies that are in that space that have to be coordinated and that have to work in unison. There is environmental impact assessment, there is land access, there is funding, there are a number of issues that have to be looked at. Then you have Eskom, which needs to be supported, which needs to be supported in stemming out corruption, both inside and outside of Eskom, which is what has hindered the company's capacity to fulfill its mandate. Then you have complex issues of maintenance. The fleet of power stations at Eskom, as you know, is quite old. And so the complexities around maintenance, and some of those complexities are also exacerbated by levels of corruption inside and outside of Eskom. So it's an issue that requires a comprehensive and a thorough assessment, project management, you name it. It's not as simple as it sounds on the surface that somebody must just press the button and we have electricity. You know that Eskom has suffered for many years of mismanagement and state capture. And that rot cannot be reversed overnight. It requires a lot of effort. The Energy Crisis Committee that is chaired by our DG in the presidency was set up specifically to respond to the crisis that brought about the stage 6 load shedding crisis. And in looking at that crisis, the president wanted to reduce the impact of load shedding. That was an immediate goal. But at the same time, not waste that crisis. Start looking at both immediate, medium-term, as well as long-term sustainable solutions more broadly around our energy supply and ensuring the reliability of that energy supply.
But now, what was the success of the team that was appointed back in 2018 that was headed by Brian Dames, the former CEO?
What has happened is that all of those teams have given all the inputs to government, and those inputs are being referenced by the National Energy Crisis Committee. So it's not as if they're starting from scratch and no work has been done. They're building on that work to take the process forward. So those advisory panel and task teams were not a waste of time. They were not set up for frivolous reasons, but all of that work, recognizing the complexity and the scale of the challenge, is now in front of the
But then South Africans would then ask Mr. Magwenya that, you know, if you're saying that there was a success since 2018 and it wasn't a waste of time or it wasn't a frivolous exercise to appoint these task teams since 2018, we found ourselves in a year where the energy crisis worsened. We found ourselves having to go through stage 6 load shedding for numerous days at a time that we had never gone through before. More days, even the actual board of Eskom saying itself and the executive that this must be the worst year that Eskom has experienced.
So I didn't use the word success. I said the work they did has not gone to waste. The work that those teams did is being referenced by the National Energy Crisis Committee. So they're not reinventing the wheel. What they are doing at the moment is to ensure better coordination and to ensure a better degree of efficiency in arriving at the goals that the president has set insofar as securing our energy supply. So I think that's important. With respect to stage 6, I think it's well known how we got there. There was an illegal strike. There was sabotage inside Eskom, issues of which law enforcement agencies had to be brought in and deal with. So let's not ignore that complexity. It wasn't just an overnight
Well, it's
occurrence.
in addition to the crisis that we were already in.
It is indeed in addition to a very complex crisis, as I've tried to paint the picture for you and the viewers, in that there are a number of complexities that have to be resolved that are being addressed with respect to our energy supply. But we cannot ignore that Eskom is a large player, and whatever that impacts Eskom will impact not only households and businesses, but it will impact the level of progress that we are able to attain insofar as executing the plan that the president outlined.
Well, it's still quite a lot of advisory councils or panels. And in terms of accountability, do you not think that it blurs?
No, let me correct that. Those panels were set up with specific terms of reference, as well as a period of tenure. So all you have now is the National Energy Crisis Committee that's pulling everything that's been done to date, but also working very hard to ensure that the plan that the president outlined is delivered within the desired outcomes. So you don't have parallel structures. So
but it doesn't blur accountability?
No, it does not. It does not. I mean, so let me put it this way. Your members of the National Energy Crisis Committee are in government. The private sector has also been added, but the majority of those members come from state organs. Eskom is part of that committee. The relevant departments, from your National Treasury to DPE, to the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, they're all part of that committee. The idea is that instead of each department trying to fulfill its mandate around energy, working in a silo sort of manner, they all work together whoever has problems and issues that need to be resolved quickly, those issues are resolved quickly. Where interdependencies are gridlock somewhere, that gridlock can be resolved a lot quicker. So this is not an advisory panel. This is an implementing committee, if you like. That's why the president tasks the DG in the presidency to drive this work so that it's easy to assess outcomes. So the lines of accountability are not blurred at all in this regard.
So you don't see, you don't agree with people who say that the president is a president with a lot of summits or panels. I mean, we had a GBV summit, we had a social sector summit recently. You don't agree with those sentiments? No.
What the president is seeking to do is to get the benefit of skills and expertise
from
others that are out there in society. To fulfill what government has to fulfill is not only for government alone. We are a constitutional democracy. We have the benefit of a broad set of expertise, experiences, and skills. And the president cannot ignore those skills. But I think it's important to highlight that we went through a very long and sad period where state capacity was almost hollowed out and diminished. And so you cannot recover from that period quickly. So whatever capacity that you can draw to assist you, you will do so, because the scale of the challenges we're facing with require business unusual
and
approach.
Minds, I guess.
And they require many minds to put shoulder to will in order to get to where we've set ourselves to.
All right. So when it comes to the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, it was such a coincidence, I assume, that it, the announcement comes after that big arrest that the Hawks and NPA made yesterday with regards to Transnet. So, what has been the reaction from the presidency and the president himself about yesterday's, yesterday's developments with your Anuj Singh and Brian Molefe having to face the might of the law? The law. Well, obviously, it's still a long way to go, but
there's been a series of developments around prosecuting state capture cases, and so any progress that is made in that regard is highly, highly welcome. All we have to do now is to allow due process to take its course. But as law enforcement agencies reach critical milestones in prosecuting state capture-related cases, it is critical for that to be seen, because it reinforces confidence. Not only in government's capacity to fulfill its mandate, but also in the country as a whole. It reinforces the fact that we are a country of laws. It also reinforces that we are a country that's guided by principles of accountability wherever we may serve in the country. So it's a positive development, just like other developments that have taken place in this regard, that we will welcome.
Yeah, of course. And yesterday was, of course, the implementation of that report, one of the reports from the Zondo Commission that the President had received earlier this year. But just to close off, Mr. Magwenya, there's been a lot of topics happening or doing the rounds, especially after that gang rape of those 8 young women in Krugersdorp at that disused mine. And of course, that brought up issues of GBV. Then it brought up issues of immigration in South Africa. Last week, we saw, for instance, the MEC of Health in Limpopo, talking about how overburdened the South African health system is to take care of, illegal immigrants who then don't pay for the bill afterwards. What's the president going to likely say around these issues later this afternoon?
So the president will enumerate in detail, or in some detail, the work that his administration has been doing, specifically around dealing with GBV. So there will be some information in that regard. There will be information with respect to work that has been done and work currently underway with regards to resolving issues of legal migration, and some of that work involves interactions with our neighboring countries as well. As you know, it's not something that South Africa can solve in isolation. So the President will address those issues because questions have been raised by members of Parliament along those lines.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We look forward to the President's answering of the questions from political parties later this afternoon. That was the President's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, speaking to us there about some of the issues that the President might have to speak about later in Parliament today. And of